And Eric Peter Abramson is a director, camera producer with a stellar bio of information from directing films to fireman and captain. Some of his documentaries include Wounded Without Weapons, 2016 feature documentary. Wounded Without Weapons uncovers the life-altering and undocumented wounds of PTSD that firefighters, medics, and search and rescue workers face in the field, and how these traumas mirror those of the war veterans everywhere, except that their wounds and diagnoses are amazingly often ignored or undiagnosed. The film will also expose the personal impact, current research, and variety of treatments through the stories of firefighters and medics who have been affected or lost their lives due to cumulative trauma. His website is filmcartel.org. You are noisy, so just step on board here, mister. Welcome, Eric, to the show this evening. Hi, Eric.
I'm not sure what noise I'm making, but I'm here.
Know.
Hi. I was being very still, so it could be coming from someone else, I suppose.
Oh, my goodness. Well, anyways, it's nice that you're here on board with us, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be out in the virtual airwaves that we find ourselves with.
Oh, absolutely. So tell me what you've been working on as of recent. I do want to cover your documentary tonight, but let me know what's been up with you the past few weeks and what you've been up to.
Well, last few weeks I've been actually in my fire world quite a bit. We've been running an academy for some new members up in the mountains, so a lot of mountain volunteers mostly who are getting their basic structure training.
Nice.
And so partly that's me getting some recertification stuff done, and it's also me just being around and available to share experience. And the film you mentioned briefly in the introduction is my new project. So that's still in sort of the research and fundraising phase mostly at the moment. But that's where we're going with that. And so there's been a lot of both mental work and doing applications and writing letters and, trying to seek some donations, which are tax deductible, of course, for this project. So
right. We'll get into that. I want to get into that tonight, especially.
Yeah.
Okay, and also we'll let everybody know how to donate if they're interested in doing that. So let's just get into the realm of documentary in general. How did you get involved in wanting to create documentaries?
Well, let's see. I guess that influence comes through my uncle, who was a still photographer, a photojournalist was his title back in the day. And that turned into doing a lot of portraiture and sort of feature stories. And he did some books in that realm. But a lot of his most prominent work was with Time magazine.
Nice.
So he had several covers for different things. One that I'm very proud of is when Leonard Peltier had the confrontation with the government in Wounded Knee. He was there's a picture that appeared of the last sort of time that Leonard and his guys came out to try to not make this a violent ending. And then it went south after this picture was taken, when they came out to basically where the line had been drawn,
Mm-hmm.
And he also covered there were some major mining strikes in the 70s in Virginia. He covered that. So I had sort of seen that side of him early in his career, and then when he started to do more portraiture, I would go work with him occasionally as an assistant. And so from him, I learned sort of how to be around famous musicians and different people that were, really awesome people to meet and know about their work, but just basically get the job done really professionally. And then I started seeing movies and explored documentary in high school and got to college, and I sort of melded journalism. I was interested in the process of journalism, but I was also at a time when things like CNN were starting to appear and the 24-hour news cycle was becoming something. Mm-hmm. How journalism was sort of changing in that traditional realm of the old network television that used to be a fairly reliable independent source of media,
Right.
And so filmmaking and documentary is more pure in that way. And so that's kind of the direction I tilted, because that's where I wanted to do it. I didn't really want to be a news person. And now it's gotten, infinitely worse in the last, really 20 years as far as ownership. And so, you have to, that's kind of that's how I got pushed towards documentary. I guess that's a long answer, but we have time to have long answers tonight.
We've got 2 hours here tonight, so we're good with this. Well, I did want to talk about your Wounded Without Weapons, and I want to know why you got interested in doing this. Why this subject?
Well, you did mention briefly that I've been a firefighter. I've been a volunteer 20 years here in Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of that, I did some professional time with the Forest Service, several seasons. And then also did some ski patrolling, too, as a professional, which is an interesting, kind of niche. Mm-hmm. But So I started my interest in that through my grandfather, who was a firefighter by default. He went to go to World War II. Basically, his buddies and him went down to sign up to go fight, and he got turned down because of his feet, which I understand now because I have feet issues myself a little bit, just from pounding on them. But anyway, he because he got turned down from the Army board, they'd send him to the Civil Defense Corps, which, was sort of like the close your blinds, shut off your lights. They do those bombing drills. And that was run by the fire department in Newark, New Jersey, where he lived at the time. Mm-hmm. And so he got involved in the fire department through that. And I remember when he was retired down in Florida, we would go to firehouses, and he knew the guys at the firehouses around where he lived, and he was obviously someone who stopped by and was real friendly. And we have guys like that now at our firehouse, older guys who are maybe firefighters or weren't, but are, they come by, and we're a community thing, and it's awesome, So it was that was where the respect began. And then, when I moved to Netherlands, I got involved in the fire department when I first moved here, and it's something I've served the community, and I'm proud to do that because I really believe that, change sort of starts where you are. I like the idea that Gandhi portrayed, that if you change a little bit of reality right in front of you, and everybody does that at once, that can be really powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got to do that. I got interested in firefighting, and now I find myself 20 years down the road as a senior guy at the department who's expected to lead people into dangerous situations, and sometimes gross stuff, and sometimes really gratifying saves and calls, and other times it's just, total BS out there that, we're out there dealing with someone who's really been irresponsible with their experimentation, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And that gets annoying sometimes, when people are just dumb with their drugs and they're driving and drinking. And but overall, I'm really proud to serve the community in that way and set an example too, that, you can help in your own community. You don't have to send a big check to somebody or, go across the planet to help somebody. That sometimes it's your community that needs it the most. So
I so agree.
With that, I've sort of paralleled that as being a filmmaker. In some ways it's been great I'm a freelance cameraman. I go and work for other people, which I'm sure we'll end up talking about tonight a little bit, but, I'm around a lot. Like, right now with Wounded Without Weapons, we've raised some money in the last couple months, which has allowed me to do the research and be available and be here at home doing more of the research and the legwork, which is, sometimes it's a lot of reading. Sometimes it's a lot of thinking about it. Sometimes it's just having a phone conversation with someone that I might, go interview in a month for the project. And, we're trying to get all these pieces to line up. And so it's been good. I've been able to serve my community, but also continue to make films. And, and the Chiefs just knows with me, I don't work Monday through Friday, and I might be here for 3 months. And then suddenly I'll walk in the Chiefs office and go, you know what, I'm going to be in Japan for 2 months, and there's a chance I might not be coming back. So if you get a message, go, sew up my house for the winter. You know what I mean? So he's sort of used, it's a different thing for me. And so that's not typical of a lot of volunteer firefighters. A lot of guys have 9-to-5 jobs, or they're academics or entrepreneurs. There's not a lot of us that are around during the day. So I've managed to get a lot of experience with the department. And so I find myself as a fairly experienced firefighter and a fairly experienced filmmaker. And then I'm seeing an issue in my own community, and that is the reaction that some firefighters have to traumatic events. Mm-hmm. PTSD is a really great buzzword, right? But it's the thing we use right now to open the door for people because they know what that means somewhat. And most people aren't really sure. They mostly associate it with soldiers. And I have several, friends, one from high school. It's a very accomplished soldier, and he's doing great. But I've seen other people that were soldiers, especially in our community up here, come home not doing so great. Mm-hmm. And most of it is in their head. You can't fix that, Right. Firefighters also experience similar symptoms. So PTSD is a very specific diagnosis. We can get into that a little bit later. But the term I like is cumulative trauma, which is sort of one event can send someone over the edge. 100 events could send someone over the edge. It's really all about the person, where they're at in their life, the experiences they've had. Maybe they've been given tools a little bit to help them. Maybe their spiritual practice of choice is something they get a lot of comfort and processing of those kind of events from. Whatever it is, different people are different, have different levels of resiliency, right? Mm-hmm. So let's see, it's coming up on 2 years now. One of my neighbors across the street, who was a member of my fire department, also became a board member of my fire department, and eventually he was on the sheriff's department. On the sheriff's department as a mountain deputy, which for people that don't live in the Boulder County area, that's like the western part of Boulder County, the western third is in the mountains, and there's police officers that are part of the sheriff's department that cover the entire county, but they specialize in the mountains because it's different. Mm-hmm. Dirt roads, a little bit different challenging clientele. It's just a different thing. And so they try to train these guys for a few different things. They have my back as a firefighter all the time. And as far as police go, I have to say that, we see a lot of negative reports about police and militarization about the police. And I think those things are valid in certain places. But here, I think we have pretty decent cops on the whole. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I had this neighbor who was a firefighter. And you can look him up online if you want to know more about his story. But he lived across the street from me. And he was involved we had a shooting at the ski area a bunch of years ago where the ski patrol, the mountain director, basically the guy that managed the whole mountain, was shot by sort of a very unstable employee. And luckily that was the only person that died that day except the shooter himself, which was by the hand of my neighbor. He had chased him down on the highway. They got into a gunfight. Luckily, John just had a minor injury. From some, it wasn't from a bullet directly, but from what we call shrapnel, something coming off of an explosion. It was a miracle he wasn't dead, and he killed this kid, who was crazy. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. He had Bibles and bombs and rifles. He was really going to go cause some mayhem. Mm-hmm. And anyway, the events, like I said, you can check it out online if you want to look at the details. But John shot this guy on the highway, and he was never the same after that. And, unfortunately, he had some issues, with addiction and such forth before that. Mm-hmm. And so, he'd been doing great. Like like I said, he was had done a really good job as a sheriff. He'd been good on our board. He was just a good guy, and people in the community liked him. And anyway, things fell apart, because of that event for him. Mm-hmm. And, I'd had him on calls for years on traumatic events. And I could tell that was when I'd go and try to talk to him myself, I could tell that was part of the formula for him. It was like things came back, and so I want to give firefighters sort of a legacy beyond myself. I'm at 20 years now, and I have to face that I'm getting older as well. I'm in my late 40s now. And so what am I going to do to change the culture that I've been in for a long time? And I see this issue with PTSD and cumulative trauma. A lot of people don't understand it. The culture in the fire service is one of toughness mostly. I think people are starting to understand that they need to learn how to be resilient and also process things that have happened in the past.
Right.
And just be conscious of it. I mean, that's part of it, of knowing, like, what, I have to back off, or I need a break, or, right. I can't take this call because it's a family issue. Mm-hmm. So and it's hard. You watch someone like my neighbor across the street who eventually took his own life, and it's a result of that event. And right. I'm confident of that, and there's no doubt about it that maybe he had other issues, that are private or whatever, but all these things were stirred up by that one event. And so I'm concerned. I mean, I feel pretty resilient myself, but I don't know, maybe I'm going to go on that call after I get off the phone with you at 2 a.m. on the East Coast and
cancel that out, would you?
Yeah, no, but that's
I
the reality of
right.
it.
No, I agree.
And so for myself personally, what's been great is, and part of the thing I love about documentary is that, often even when I'm part of a crew, I get to go learn about something that I need to know about. And my exploration of it is part of the reason that the film will end up being accessible to the average person. You know what I mean? Because I'm thinking about it like that. I'm thinking about it like I'm a rookie firefighter, sure, but I'm also thinking about it as just a person who likes movies and what do I want to learn, or what kind of insight do I want to gain? And so I just feel like the world, it's important to meld your worlds sometimes. And these two worlds have been a big part of my life, and the timing is good for it. It needs to happen. Even Boulder County, where we live in Colorado, is a fairly open and progressive community overall. Mm-hmm. It's an entitled community, but as far as the rescue and fire service, when you compare it to other places in the country, they have programs, but it's still, everyone knows that it's not quite where it needs to be. Here's an interesting fact for you that I mentioned this rookie Fire Academy that we're doing right now at the beginning of the show. That's about a 250-hour, give or take, class. So that's a lot of days and weekends over the last couple months. They spent about 20 minutes talking about psychological issues. Now, that's really not enough for you to help with the psychology of your patients, and it's definitely not enough to help yourself.
Right. And
what to do about it. There's none of that presented, and that's pretty typical when you're starting, and that's the place to learn the resiliency in the beginning.
Right.
So there's a need, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And then the other thing about documentary now, especially with these type of films, I'm not doing some rock star story or famous studio or a concert film where we know they're going to go sell it to somebody. This one is, dependent more on the sort of the social cause angle. And I believe in that mechanism now to make films happen because I'm not beholden to some agenda,
Right. Exactly. Well, it's such a serious issue. I mean, this is huge. And I really applaud you for all you do. I love firemen, by the way, and I really respect you guys out there risking your lives for everybody. And we all love you. Anyways, I want to thank you for all you do. And I think what you're addressing here for PTSD is huge. And for those who don't understand post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe we get more of a breakdown as far as what this entails. Now, obviously, this just people can be fine, and all of a sudden they just get triggered and they just snap. Is that pretty much what you've seen?
No, I think it's, again, here's the thing. I think let's talk about PTSD. Okay. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. You can look it up in a psychological definition, go online, Google. There is a specific diagnosis. If I would just summarize it and give it the simplistic explanation, a PTSD diagnosis is someone who's really unable to get either the vision or the emotion from an event to stop. And that period needs to be, it seems like from what I'm collecting and all the things I'm reading, it's about 3 months. So it's very natural. Like, okay, so we go on this horrific accident. We don't need to get into the details of what happens on the call, but it's gross, right? And bloody and nasty. And it really affects somebody, right? Mm-hmm. It's very, very natural to think about it a lot, especially the day, after it happened, because, what could have I done? You self-assess a lot. You think about the things, and that's good because you apply those to the next one. But it also brings back a lot of emotion about it and feeling, but that's okay for a while. And ideally, after maybe a couple of weeks, you really shouldn't be experiencing that anymore. And if it starts to stick around, that's when it becomes more like an actual diagnosis. But cumulative trauma, I think you can see all kinds of shades. I think I have two parallels that are interesting. One that personally affects me, which is when I was a kid, I was called dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And after a bunch of years of school being just a disaster, I went to this small school in Connecticut for a couple of years, my junior and senior year. And this is a school that specialized in learning disabilities. And within the first week I got there, they told me it is a label, but there's a whole wide range of people that learn differently and process information differently. And just because you do that doesn't mean you can't do anything that you want to, you know what I mean? And so it kind of opened my mind to, there's a spectrum. The other one that doesn't affect me, but about is that you hear about autism, right? Mm-hmm. Autism spectrum, right? That's a more general where you can have shades of it. And so I guess the answer to your question is, sometimes something happens and someone snaps. One of the guys that I hope to be in the film is a guy named Michael Ferrara. His nickname is Mongo. For about 30 years, he served the Aspen area, Pitkin County, I think that is. And as in various roles, he was on a ski patrol. He was the coroner, I think, for a while. He was sheriff's officer, served the area. He was the dude. Like, if his pager went off, man, he was going to help somebody in the area, right? And it could be anything. A plane crashed on the side of a mountain. He's a very accomplished guy, right? He had been on plane crashes a couple times in the area, but he responded. He was like second guy to a crash out at the airport in Aspen, which is kind of a hairy approach in there. I don't know if, I'm sure maybe someone listening has flown in there. There's this notch you got to kind of poke through. Well, this, I forget the connection, but it was like, some really wealthy son of some executive in New York had rented this plane with a bunch of his buddies, and the plane went down in a fiery mess on the runway, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy's second in his own truck. So he doesn't have a lot of tools, and it was horrific. And he said that was his trigger point. But I've also seen people that have, relationship issues. They're angry, or they're grumpy, or they keep telling me that they're having dreams, but it isn't lasting all the time. Like, it really does affect people. And I think the resiliency tools can help reduce that, which can set up for that trigger event,
Mm-hmm.
Again, I want to clarify, I'm not there's a lot of people that are much smarter than me. And I would encourage anyone actually listening to me at some point, to reach out, maybe, through the page and say, hey, I work with PTSD. I'm always interested in what people are doing in this regard, whether it's with soldiers or not.
Right.
But that's sort of
yeah.
the answer to it. It's
Okay.
not, it's shades, it's a spectrum,
Right. No, that makes sense. Well, you hear it through the military quite often, and you hear it, but you don't really hear it through the firemen. I mean, I think that it's interesting that you're addressing this, and I really think we really need to do that. And of course, you're talking about other personnel too, and it's not just the firemen, but law enforcement, other divisions, search and rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing is, I hate to admit it, but it's like I want to include everybody that suffers in it, but then I would have like this insanely 8-10 hour film, right?
Right.
So I kind of have to focus in on something, and there's this saying in Hollywood mostly, like, write what you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of going for the idea of the firefighter, and here's why: because right now, I think the military, they got a handle on what's going on. They're working their own style, and they're actually very open. The VA is doing some really interesting alternative therapies. Most of them are additional to their traditional things like yoga, meditation. There's a serious study going on in Britain, I believe, and at the VA in the United States on MDMA usage as part of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some alternate therapies and things that are outside of the traditional model too that we're interested in. And so I mean that's so I lost my track of thought, actually.
That's okay. No, you were
just going with that.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So anyway, the medical and the VA are doing a lot. The soldiers are doing a lot. But the thing I think that I want the film to also reach people that may have cumulative trauma from a personal experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be equally damaging, especially because you have no training,
Right.
With firefighters, people are like, God, how do you do that? Well, you know what? I've been trained to do a lot of really interesting, weird, dangerous shit. Excuse my language. Sorry.
It's okay. We'll keep it G-rated. That's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will try my best. I'm a firefighter after all.
That's all right.
So I have training,
Right.
When I approach a car with people screaming in it, I understand what I have to do to get them out. So part of me is able to focus on what needs to happen. I always have my training to go to, and that's what we try to hit home with our guys, and our gals too, of course.
Right.
But
how do you calibrate to that? But how do you calibrate to it? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but the citizen doesn't have any of that. So the citizens that come across a crash in the desert, take Jim Morrison, for example. Jim Morrison and his family came across a bunch of Indians all over the highway, and they don't have any training. So that event in front of them would be way more horrific. If a guy's walking at me really injured, I know what to do to stabilize him. I got to get that guy out of that car. I know how to do that. Like, I can look at the horror a little later, where the civilian can be really affected. It's also, you see it a lot in abusive families, right? Or where there's an abusive parent or an alcohol, whatever it is, that there could be trauma in the house. You can be the person in a family who found someone in your family committed suicide, and that event can be a trigger to PTSD. So I wanted to focus on someone who's seen as heroic and infallible, who has the same kind of experience as a soldier, and maybe that person, that civilian that sees it, also can identify, like, oh man, that guy's going to yoga. I heard that that's pretty good, and it seems to be working for this, New York firefighter, tough guy. Maybe I should try that, and that'll help me with the murder that I witnessed, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really, I kind of, I definitely want to explore what the military is doing. I'm interested in a lot of their research because they also, unfortunately, have the most data. They did a huge study of Vietnam vets when they came back, and then they called it shell shock, or battlefield psychosis was a World War II. Something interesting I learned a couple weeks ago, that there are actually diaries of doctors from the Civil War, and they used to call it soldier's heart. So, this is something that's been known by the military for a long time. And so, part of my expert aspect of the film will certainly be talking to, all kinds of researchers, but I intend to talk to the military as high level as I can get them to talk about it. And I think they will, because they've learned a lot and they're working on a lot of interesting stuff. And I think they're giving guys the help they need. I'd prefer that we maybe reassess their mission.
Yeah.
I don't like sending guys into places that we really shouldn't be. Some of those places I've been on the border of myself. And, I could have told you that, that this might not have been a good idea.
Well, I think you're right. Another thing is, I don't think you're right about the mainstream. They're not really calibrated for that kind of trauma. Although they watch television, they see a lot of violence, and they're kind of entrained on that level, maybe to be desensitized. But I think when a real life situation transpires, I don't think they can handle it very well. What's your impression of that?
Well, yeah, I think, I don't know. I'm looking at it through the lens of someone who's, not super highly trained, but yeah, pretty well trained with a fair amount of experience. And I'm looking at it through a little different lens. I mean, you're not going to learn how to save someone's life from a show like Chicago Fire.
Right.
You're not going to learn how to be an ER doc from watching ER. It's entertaining sometimes. I don't find it, because there's always this just major flaw, there's like, no, that's really not how a firefighter would really do that. And that blows the story. Cops don't watch cop shows, firefighters don't. But I will say this, I think that people are definitely desensitized to violence. There's no question about it. Our culture has done that. And I honestly, I'll say this now. I'm not much of a person for big conspiracies. I have a much deeper theory that that's the distraction method so you're not focused on the real thing that's happening. That's very close to that, So, for example, I think that the desensitization process is part of the industrial complex. People are okay being entertained by being in a war scenario. It's okay to send your neighbor's, 18-year-old kid to Afghanistan. Right. And so I can't make that direct connection, but I think that is definitely happened. And when people are confronted with the real thing, more often than not, I will come on an accident like in Boulder Canyon, which is a canyon between the city of Boulder and where I live in Nederland. We get some accidents where more often than not, there's a civilian there before I am, right? And they saw it happen. And so they more often than not do really amazing stuff sometimes. People have exhibited some amazing bravery, but the people that are most affected by those scenes are the ones that feel helpless and can't figure out what they can do. Like they just can watch it. And that's what they're used to at home on TV maybe too. So people that step up, it's usually because they have some background or training, or they, maybe they were a soldier one time or whatever it is. But I found that people that can process the event better, it's partly because they have that training to lay back on, and soldiers I've talked to, and I have several soldiers, one in particular on my fire department on the career side, who's an Air Force guy. We've talked about that a little bit, and he said it's the same on the military side, that, yes, there's a certain amount of, a bunch of your buddies die and get severely injured in a Humvee, including yourself, and then your head's messed up too. That's not surprising, but it's the training that helps get everybody out of that situation.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you have to go into override, or overdrive. Literally, I would say, in order to get through those hellacious events. There's no doubt about it. And once again, I think that there's a certain level of calibration that's associated with that type of profession in general. And maybe if they do have, the PTSD later on, they're still really taking a large hit energetically and on so many different levels, physically, psychologically, when they're dealing with it. So I once again, I don't think people realize this, what kind of trauma you guys have to deal with. And it's a lot of trauma for a regular average bearer. That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, and I'm on a small mountain department. Nederland Fire runs about 400 calls a year. So that's about one a day, a little more, a little less, depending on the year. Some of those are just going to put out a campfire that some idiot left behind. Other times it's three of us and a cop having to wrestle a guy to the ground who's whacked out on some sort of weird synthetic drug, combined with like meth. That sucks. That energy is so bad. Like you go into the room and, I'm a little more hippy dippy than maybe some of my guys are, especially when they have military background or, they like wrestling people to the ground. The thing is, ultimately, they're there to make sure it's done safely and everybody's safe. And, I don't blame the cop when he opens the sliding glass door after they call 911 because the guy's comatose and he stands up and lunges at the cop from across the room. I expect our to get the guy under control, and he did it beautifully. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
did it with respect. He was calm. I mean, he forced the guy to the ground. I'm not going to lie, but we didn't. If the guy, if he was conscious enough to tell us he wasn't breathing and we could see that, we're not going to jump on his throat. But I was very impressed with this very stressful situation. But you come away from that exhausted, both just physiologically, because, it's an adrenaline dump. I had to ride, this guy's shoulder for, a good 15, 20 minutes. Huh.
Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting. Sorry. I'm actually, our department's getting a call right at the moment.
I noticed that. Do you have to go?
No, it comes over my phone. So you probably heard the little tone.
I did. That's all right. Hope
That's
everything's
all right.
okay.
No, I'm off the hook for now.
Okay, good. Well, well, we've got rain out there, so hopefully that'll keep away the fire, right?
Yeah, no, fire danger up in the mountains right now is fairly low, which is good.
Yes, absolutely.
We like that. But as we were reminding our guys today, we did a refresher today so you can reacquire your red card for the year. That, a lot of people forget that, when you get a lot of moisture in our area, we have a lot of moisture in the ground. We're not in a drought on the Front Range here in our part of it. But all this grass can dry out very quickly, and grass is what spreads a fast fire on a windy day up here. So it doesn't really matter what happens right now. It's really what June, July, August look like that really drive our true fire season up here. But
right, yeah,
little less in there. We got lots of time, so I figured it's nice we can meander a little into some other areas.
Oh, absolutely.
But,
so let me ask you something real quick here.
Yeah.
Now, I know that I'm not a proponent of medication for PTSD. Antipsychotics or anything like that. What's your impression of that? Have you interviewed people who have been subjected to being medicated, over-medicated?
I'm aware that people are being over-medicated. I intend to look at the traditional method for sure, because I'd like people to make their own mind up about, I'm going to look at A, B, C, D, E, right? Here are the 5 things. And honestly, I haven't really read enough. I've been reading it more right at the moment. I've been researching more from the fire perspective, which is more about like how to teach resiliency, how to get the people that are on scene to use psychology to help them. So that calms the scene down and that helps your impact too. Like there's a lot of that. I haven't really gotten into the traditional pharmacology yet, because I know that's there and it's huge, big pharma. And I will look at it, and ultimately I'll decide in the edit room what I want to pursue as far as, but I was a student of psychology, which is not using medication really, unless some people do use it in the therapy process, but overall it's not like the psychiatry, which obviously prescribes drugs.
Right.
I'm more a proponent of give yourself tools ahead of time for something if you can, and then work it out with your head if you can.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right. What about? Go ahead.
But just to sum that up, I also am not a big fan of crazy chemicals. Some that are tested, some are effective, some aren't. Mm-hmm. I see several drugs in the field that we use that are fantastic. I've watched Narcan, for example, save 15 people's lives from heroin and opiate overdoses. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing about it is I'm also seeing a lot of people, and obviously we're in Colorado, which has legal medical marijuana and recreational, but on the medical side, I've seen several people who were able to really get off a majority of the opiates that they were on and substitute a fair amount of like either edibles, topical, smoking marijuana, whatever it was, ingesting combinations. But that means for a month or two, they're not on the opiates. Mm-hmm. To me, right there, that's enough to say, okay, there's other options here, So I will look into it. I mean, the thing that I love I mentioned this earlier, that documentary, especially really responsible documentarians, I think, are the last journalists, right?
I agree.
We tend to raise our money. I mean, sure, I could go to like Walmart and get a bunch of money from their foundation. I might have to do that. Probably not, though, right? I'm going to go for people that see what I see and want to help us with the cause. Mm-hmm. And so, it's that kind of thing. It's like I feel like I'm not really beholden to anybody. We're going to tell the story that we want to tell. And what I love is that just in my experience, I kind of know how to go get an interview without pissing somebody off and still get what I need for the agenda.
Right.
If I have that. I don't really have an agenda. For me, what it is I'm going to tell a little bit about my own story of just what it's like to do what we do up here and set that as the setting for it. And it is me going to explore, not me on camera, but through my eyes, the film will be, hey, I want to learn more about this. How do I make it better for my future firefighter? You know, and what can I do to fix the ones that are broken right now? Or, hey, that guy's really seeming like he needs more than just to go have a beer or two every night at the bar after his shift, or whatever it is, you know. Right. That's where my head's at with it. And so I'm going to present what seems really valid. And obviously I'm not going to get away from the pharmacological. I definitely would say, and just my experience from actually being on the ambulance here in Ned, just like many other types of treatment, sometimes pills and someone who's compliant on medication does really well. I would say a majority of them do. The problem is when you get into non-compliance or doing other things with it, that can put people off the rails. And then there's a percentage of people that like you're talking about, that are over-medicated and messed up, and they need some other alternative. So I think it's like that, you know. And we could definitely talk for hours about, you know, the huge business that biopharm is and how much influence they have in Washington. But I think people know all that.
Yeah,
listening
they do.
To this.
They're pretty savvy. I was going to ask you about, is there a support group for PTSD for say, these divisions? Is there any kind of counseling, which is a professional counselor that can help as well? Do they have anybody to go to?
In the fire service?
Right, yes.
Yeah, well, like I'll give you an example. In Boulder County, when we have a traumatic call, like say a motorcycle wreck in a car, and there's a bunch of people involved, and there's survivors and uninjured people involved, that maybe witnesses. We have a group of people that come up from Boulder. Some of them are just like social workers. Others are trained as psychologists, and they have various types of knowledge, and they help not only provide resources to go further, but also can counsel people on scene. And those people are very valuable to us. We have access to them as well. We also have a program within both the sheriff's department and the fire side that in Boulder, like if I need to, I think every year I can just go even for 8 hours for no charge to my department. And most of us, that's there if you really need it, you know?
That's great.
So after that, I think if Boulder County's got our back, but you as a person have to be willing to invest in it. You know, you can't, and that was the failing, you know, my neighbor who took his life, his department tried really hard, and his buddies on the department tried really hard. And some of the firefighters, like my chief, was real close with him. You know, I was his neighbor. We all gave it a shot, but he wasn't receptive, right? He was going to go his own path. And so that's part of it. You have to meet it's like anything. If you have an addiction, at some point, if the addiction is taken over, you have to admit that you have it and move forward, you know? And I think it's the same way. Like, that's that culture of toughness in the fire service. Like, for years, until 9/11, really, with the firefighters in New York, that was a hugely traumatic event for the department, both, you know, emotionally and just from an organizational standpoint. When you lose a ton of officers and leadership in a big organization like that, I mean, it's going to fall apart quickly. And they kept it together. Obviously, it's one of the great fire departments in the country, and they've had their problems. I think there was some, you know, big conspiracy where a bunch of guys claim they had PTSD and didn't, but there are legitimate issues going on there. They're doing some research. They've been doing some resiliency training in New York City as well. And so people are starting to talk about it more.
Yeah, it seems like it's okay. They can't hide it.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay to talk about it. You know, it used to be buck up, get on the truck, you know?
Right.
I don't want to hear about it. Get back on the truck, man. We got to go. And that's how it was for many years in the culture. You were tough. If you admitted you were cuckoo, you were going to lose your job.
Right.
You know, or you were feeling weird, or, you know, you're having trouble dealing with your wife, or it's hard, you know, you can't, I don't currently have a spouse or, you know, a significant other. And I know that some of my guys, it's a lot because their wife, can't really absorb you can't explain to someone what you just went to, both for privacy, you know, for the patient's privacy. And also just, it's like, you know, soldiers say this a lot. Oh, you know, until you've been under enemy fire with your peers, you know, fighting for your life, you don't really know what that is. And I've been in some tense situations in various places on the planet where I thought things were going to happen, including in Texas once, but I've never been under enemy fire, you know, and But I've talked to my soldier buddies and my fire friends, and we'd say the same thing, until you've been in a fucking burning building, until you've been into a burning building, don't pretend like you know what that is, or you've, had to pull a screaming person out of a car all broken, it's horrible,
Right.
It's tough stuff to deal with.
Yeah, it's not television. Once again, it's not this virtual space. This is real life situations here, which is huge.
Hey,
right there. Okay.
I was just gonna say, sometimes television gets it right. Sometimes you see a sequence, it's like, wow, that was pretty cool, and that is kind of what it is. And other times you're like, nah, you pull the flag and throw it.
Right. Well, let me ask you something here. What are some warning signs of possible suicide by PTSD? Now, you said you couldn't do anything for your friend. So what was showing up that was cueing you that something was really, really wrong?
Wow. Well, some of that I don't think I want to talk about.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, because it's his sort of story,
Okay. Well, what about a generic example?
But yeah, let's get into some of the things that you might see in someone. Because you know what? There's a lot. Hopefully, we have a lot of people listening, right? There's a ton of people out there, and they know a firefighter or a police officer or a soldier, and they're seeing like shortness of temper, withdrawal from society. It's similar to depression sometimes. Like, oh man, they used to ride that Harley Davidson all the time, but I haven't seen the Harley leave the garage all summer. Changing of habits, but it's a lot of withdrawal, a lot of anger. The more pronounced thing is the freak out, of losing it in an open public space. For soldiers, I know for them, it's very difficult to be in like uncontrolled open places a lot. Because that's the combat scenario. In Afghanistan, for example, those guys are in small villages, lots of walls, holes, doors. To be in that environment, like a narrow city street, can trigger a similar thing. For anyone that's traveled to far off lands, I bet most of them have been back in the States and they smell something that reminds them of that place. There's certain places I'll hit in the country and it'll just take me back 15, 20 years to northern India or to Japan, just the smell or some trigger in your memory, right? And so think about if that's attached to a painful memory,
right? Instead
of a positive one. It's the same type of trigger. That olfactory thing can be insane with memory, right? Those two things are very connected. The sense of smell is something that people underappreciate.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with that. What about, even I would imagine with a fireman, even smoke might be a trigger to some degree.
Yeah, perhaps, maybe like you couldn't save that baby in that burning building in Boston. And every time you smell that same kind of acrid sofa burning smell or something, that could, sure. That's something I don't know. No one's ever told me that, but I just know from experience that I've heard from soldiers, especially like the gunpowder or the smells of the day the explosion went off, can trigger people. So
yeah, once again, I think the 9/11 was huge insofar as a psychological impact across the board. I mean, even with fire departments, but also with everybody, law enforcement, people, the mass collective in general I think they were literally traumatized for some time. I remember the day that transpired. I mean, I was supposed to teach a martial arts class and we couldn't do a thing but just kind of meditate. So
I was going to the airport that morning to fly to the East Coast. And what's scary is that for many years, the flight that, we could get in again, big conspiracy, maybe, but I believe planes crashed that day. And the one that ended up in that field is Flight 93 that goes from Newark Airport to Denver to San Francisco. I had a ticket for that 2 weeks after. It was pretty wiggy, man.
Wow. But,
for me, I think the thing about that whole thing is that, again, I think this is a great example for me to use about how I see conspiracy. I know for sure that in that building complex, there were a lot of sensitive things going on, especially in those smaller buildings. And it does not surprise me that someone scuttled those. But I think the real crime and the reason that these ideas get propped up, that it was an inside job and all this other stuff, is that the real crime was that there was business relationships with the Saudi family. They had the intel sitting on their desks, and they decided tactically that it would be better for their business interests to make it happen. That, I believe, is what really happened on the day of 9/11, and that these were crazy terrorists, and they pulled off a plot, and these guys let it happen. That's as far as it goes for me, and I think that's enough, Right. So I think it's a good example for how I see it. We could argue and disagree. I've heard lots of people, and it had some interesting discussions about engineering and all that, but I do believe that a lot of firefighters died that day.
Right.
I've been in several of their houses where their memorials are. My guys, there's about 4 or 5 of them every year, go to Denver and do 2 flights in the tallest building in Denver, and each of them wears a tag of a guy. And if this was an inside job and they murdered a bunch of people, I find it really, I can't get my head around that. So yes, it was a traumatic event, whether you think it was an inside job or you don't. You know, I agree with you. It was a pretty horrific event. And, you know, to speak bluntly, though, too, because I've been in countries that are involved in terrorism. I was in Northern Ireland. I've been in the Paki-Afghani border on the Pakistan side, fortunately, way before the war, you know. And then Northern India in Kashmir is a very unstable area that I've been in. You know, it always is. I think it's easy to get distracted about what happened, but I'm pretty confident that that's what happened.
Well, that's a logical approach, and I can appreciate that. Actually, it's very refreshing because I know there is a lot, and it's so much. There's almost like an overkill of data insofar as information goes with 9/11. The bottom line is it was a traumatic event, and many lives were gone, and we can't bring those. You know, we can't bring those people back. Families were affected. The whole thing was just atrocious. So that's the biggest thing, and I do appreciate you guys going out there and actually paying your respect to those who left. And were
it's important,
so,
you know.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it is. What the cool thing about one of the coolest things about my hybrid life, I guess you could call it a little bit, is that I get to travel to these really cool far off places. Sometimes it's in our country. You know, I'll be in a little city. I can go to any firehouse in this country, and within a couple minutes of me talking, and they figure out, oh, this guy's for real, and obviously they're for real because they're in their station. We're brothers. It doesn't matter about our politics, what we believe happened on any day of the year, you know, what we look like, what color we are. We're all like on the same page. And it's been cool. Like when I was in Japan a bunch of years ago in Osaka, the main fire station for Osaka is attached to this hotel. And so I went down there in very un-Japanese. I just showed up at the front door and I said to the guy says, oh, hold on. And the guy comes that speaks English. Said, I would love to tour your firehouse. Oh, do you have an appointment? I'm like, no. And he says, oh, no, not really possible. And then I got one of my business cards from the fire department, which has my rank on it. And I slid it under the lucite, you know, and he looks down at it and he shows it to the other guy. And then I actually slide I have an ID that's for the county, which is a very official looking government ID. It's how I get through the barrier to get home if something's really going down, you know, or it's, you know, someone wants to see my ID on a call, which that never happens because we know everybody pretty much. Anyway, I slide that under there and they look at that. And the guy looks at me very stiff and says, please come back in 45 minutes. And he looks scared, you know, I'm like, oh, okay. All right. 45. I look at my watch and he give him the thumbs up and I, you know, arigato gozaimasu, and I bow and I leave. And I come back right on time. And the whole station's lined up in the bay to salute me.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm a captain.
Nice.
And I spent like the next 3 hours there. And two guys spoke so little English, but they showed me everything. I totally got what was going on. I sat down and showed them pictures on my phone of our department. It was killer. And I've done that in Sweden and a couple other places, Denmark. And I love that. You know, it's like this cool brotherhood. And when a bunch of us get hurt. But what's interesting is even when it's a small event, we lost a few firefighters. 2 weeks ago in Boston, I believe, in a warehouse fire. And we all hear about it and we talk about it as firefighters and we make sure we learn from their deaths, you know.
Right.
You know, so it's cool. Like it's not something I knew existed because of my grandfather. He made me very aware that it's a great culture. And what I've come to learn as an officer, because we do some more officer training, which is more about how to manage people and how to get the best out of them and all this, you know, stuff that you need to know, which actually suits me as a director quite well.
Oh, absolutely. And Eric, we're going to head for a break. We'll be right back, everybody. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back here